I don't know how you like sit up so straight all the time. Like, I just naturally, I can't do it. I'll try. Doesn't feel comfortable.
Confidence.
Okay, I need to do this.
Tits out, Rob.
Okay. Wow. That's like, if that's the most showbiz thing you've ever said, that's the secret to this YouTube channel and any YouTube channel success.
So you gonna lead this or?
No. So, you're out of your boot today. It's a big day for her.
It's a big day. Well, I kind of started walking yesterday. Took the boot off yesterday.
Yeah, you couldn't wait.
I couldn't wait. Whatever, what's one day?
So it's the first full day without the boot.
So yeah, I was no weight for 4 weeks. And now, those 4 weeks are gone and going up for a run. Just kidding. Walking's hard, but I'm still excited. We are about 11 months into using ketogenic therapy and metabolic therapies to treat my schizoaffective disorder. And you're just doing it too.
I'm just along for the ride. Yeah.
So it's been almost a year, and it kind of feels like a good opportunity to do another one of these kind of update videos where we kind of chat about what's going on and what the experience has been like.
So to kind of further elaborate on that update, so you started actually tapering your medication only like a few weeks into using keto because of like potentiation effects. And then over the last, well, you've been off medication now completely for like 2.5 months, but it's been kind of a slow tapering process over the 9 months in terms of totally reducing your medication.
I think it was about 10 months, but we just put out a video where I go more into detail about what that experience was like. Maybe we'll put that up here. But basically, I have now been completely off of my antipsychotic and all psychiatric medication for, I guess, about 2.5 months now. And I've addressed this before where people are still feeling like relapse is inevitable and, oh, that's not long enough to know if you're steady off meds. But maybe it's important to talk about what the experience was like before doing keto, where if I missed a dose or if I started to taper down on my medication, I would instantly have pretty intense psychotic symptoms.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this in terms of what that could have been like from like a withdrawal perspective. Like maybe it was a situation where you missed a dose of your antipsychotic medications and then there was like withdrawal-induced psychosis symptoms. But then I was also thinking about how, I mean, even when you were on your medication, even high doses of medication, because you had to come up, you would still have breakthrough symptoms.
Yeah. And that's something that's kind of an important component here, is that even while I was on like the highest doses of antipsychotic and not doing keto, I still had symptoms basically every day. And so to now be in a place where I don't know the last time I had psychotic symptoms and I haven't struggled with my mood at all, that's important to know, especially in the context of not being on any psychiatric medication. And I understand that there are people in the comments sharing that they have a loved one or they themselves have more of an episodic experience of the illness, whereby they can go for like 6-month stretches with no symptoms, but then it comes back. I hear you that that's your experience, but that just has not been my experience of the illness. And that is why I'm fairly confidently saying that my illness is in remission, having not had any symptoms for almost the entirety of the last 11 months, and also being completely off psychiatric medications for 2.5 months. Something I realized I did not touch on in my video where I described my deprescribing journey and what that looked like was how withdrawal impacted our relationship. I think we actually joked about it in one of the earlier vlogs that with withdrawal comes inevitable relationship conflict.
I think like just navigating the past 11 months, it's been difficult to kind of navigate the like waxing and waning capacity. And there has been elements of like, oh, this kind of feels familiar in terms of like how it introduces conflict into our relationship. There's definitely been a trajectory. Like, first of all, I think you do have to account for like what those withdrawal symptoms did in terms of your capacity, but also looking at what has been like the trajectory of your capacity. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely been obviously up. And I mean, looking forward to not dealing with withdrawal symptoms anymore. I think kind of a good example of how you've improved is just kind of taking stock of like the last month. So we're just finishing fall here, and fall has been like a typically challenging period of the year for whatever reason, right?
I think that's a common experience for people
Yeah.
with mental illness, that typically fall and spring are more difficult, especially like mood illnesses.
And it hasn't really affected you this year. And it also happened at a time when you broke your foot and you couldn't be running, which is a pretty therapeutic, grounding.
It's not just running. Like getting around on crutches and not being able to put any weight on one foot is difficult.
Yeah.
And I've been sad, okay? Like it's been hard.
But even that hasn't been super like incapacitating from like a mental health perspective.
No, I've just been like a healthy amount of sad about it.
As anyone would be when they break their foot.
Yeah. But still, I think probably operating at a higher capacity, even incapacitated physically like that and emotionally kind of, than I was pre-keto, I think.
Yeah. And maybe it's worth talking more about like what that capacity looks like in like a practical or like example perspective, because we talk about that a lot. We talk about how capacity has changed. And to me, where I notice it more is you showing up in terms of taking care of your own life and like keeping up with life, your to-do list type stuff, keeping up with laundry.
Can you tell what Rob's love languages are?
Like, or when you weren't feeling well, you could just spend like a whole day in bed kind of thing. And that doesn't happen anymore. And being present in obviously our life, our partnership with work, showing up in the kids' lives.
I think it just all feels more balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah. Between you and I as like partners in those realms. But something I actually wanted to come back to was what you said about how the trajectory of my capacity and whatever is trending up. And I've heard from a lot of other people too, that as that happens using metabolic therapies or whatever it may be, it becomes way more devastating when they experience any small bit of symptoms or difficulties with mental health, even if, relatively speaking, they're less intense difficulties than they experienced before recovery or remission. And I think that's kind of been our experience too, whereby what kind of initiated conflict during those withdrawal periods is we got acclimated or accustomed to higher degrees of capacity and more high levels of functioning. And then all of a sudden, when that was taken away a little bit, it felt almost catastrophic. You know, it felt like a bigger loss.
It threw a wrench into things.
Yeah.
It's kind of gotten me thinking about like the concept of change throughout this whole experience, and how, first of all, you do get used to the improvements kind of quickly. And it almost is difficult to imagine like, well, what was life like before this? But that also, those changes seem like they happen so slowly, I think, sometimes, that you don't totally notice.
So we kind of touched on how our relationship is like feeling more balanced, having gone through this, and how my capacity has increased and my experience of my illness has improved drastically. But I think there's more maybe to dive into in terms of how it's impacted our relationship, because there's been a lot of change.
You know, I think what kind of immediately comes to mind is how there would be this like idea that, okay, keto is improving your mental health, and so overall that should improve our like relationship. But I think at times it's almost felt like the opposite, where it's like just allowed more space for us to like explore and try to work on problems that we've had in a relationship. And that feels not the most comfortable at times.
But I think it's a really good thing.
No, it is a good thing. It's just, it's against the like expectation that you might have, where you're like, oh, like this is going to like improve. No, I think it's not that it hasn't.
No, I think what you're trying to get at is like every relationship, every couple has resentments and root issues, you know, that show up in various ways throughout life. That's just part of like an intimate partnership, I think. And for the longest time, when I was really struggling with my illness, there almost wasn't a capacity to like address that or work through that, because we were oftentimes kind of in survival mode or trying to just react to difficulties that arose as a result of my decreased capacity, as a result of me struggling, or as a result of how my illness was affecting our life or our relationship. And there wasn't that space or that opportunity to really dive into working on like the fundamentals of our relationship. And so, yeah, that has been difficult. And we've gone to a lot of therapy. But I think ultimately it's been really, really beneficial and impactful to be able to like give each other that and to have the capacity to show up in navigating that and working through that together.
Mm-hmm.
I think it strengthened our relationship. So Rob's wrong. It's all good. Yeah.
It's given us more space.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think something that's interesting about this journey, obviously, like there's the challenges and what's difficult, but I think something that's unique for us in terms of these challenges has kind of been sharing this journey in general and sharing it with a huge audience. And I think something that has been difficult for us and somewhat unexpected has been the amount of pushback and resistance that there has been to
hate
this. Yeah. I think that it's been something that has been difficult to not take personally. I think we've been somewhat prepared for it because of the past 5 years of having this channel and posting and knowing that, like posting videos and knowing how people comment or whatever. But this has been a little different. Like this has been hard. You don't want to talk about it. I think the feedback, we'll call it feedback, has informed how it is that we feel we want to approach content.
We have spent months and months and months trying to process this and just trying to wrap our heads around where people are coming from and trying to empathize with that, I think, because it's very clear, even though it's showing up in what feels like very hateful ways or, stuff like that, I do want to acknowledge that I understand it's coming from some kind of place of hurt. And so I think it's really important, and we kind of owe it to you guys, our audience, to try to explore that in terms of figuring out, okay, what is hurting here? Like, what do we need to figure out together? We are thinking that there is this element of identity feeling challenged or threatened by the proposition of a new way of managing mental illness being metabolic therapies. I get that, like, especially over the last maybe half a year of this experience, I myself have struggled quite profoundly with maybe a sense of loss over a component of my own sense of self and identity in terms of what I came to understand who I am in terms of how my mental illness impacts who I am, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think just having a much better understanding of how enmeshed mental illness can become with identity and how that is totally true for me too. I mean, my God, we made a YouTube channel about how to live well with schizophrenia, which is obviously enmeshing that experience in my sense of self. I've struggled with navigating that kind of experience or experiment of then trying to figure out, well, who am I if this whole experience of my illness and what it means to manage it and live well with it is profoundly shifting. And I imagine that feels hard for a lot of other people too. Yeah, I don't know how much to get into this because I think this is going to be a really long conversation and thing that we're trying to address. I think maybe what I want to communicate is that I understand to a degree where those like feelings of hurt or frustration or fear maybe too are coming from, because I've kind of been navigating it myself. And I get that this is a potentially really big paradigm shift in how we view mental health and the treatment of mental health, which of course impacts how we view ourselves. And so I hope that I can show up in this conversation in a way that feels okay at the very least, or good to people who may be navigating that. And I also hope that anyone who's struggling with that can maybe show up in this conversation in less hateful ways. And maybe just having a more respectful dialogue about this stuff. And also that I am not pushing this on anyone. I am not expecting anyone to do what I am doing. I just do think, though, that it is important to be able to collectively have conversations around identity as it pertains to mental illness, and our collective identity as people living with schizophrenia or people living with mental illness, and how we can work together to figure out how to improve that experience.
We know that the content has been really helpful for a lot of people, and that some people are more critical of it. And I think the main thing that is important to communicate is kind of where we're coming from on this. And it isn't from this like malicious place where we're trying to like, mess people up or not support people anymore. And I think there's a lot of people kind of who are feeling like left behind. Our approach right now and our like why we're sharing what we're sharing is along the lines of not wanting people to be left behind. We want this information to help as many people as possible. And we want people to still continue to figure out how to improve their quality of life, even if they aren't doing like medical keto. And that's the like position that we're coming from, not from this like medications are bad and you need to stop them kind of perspective.
The psychiatric system is broken.
Yeah.
Like, no, we're just trying to figure out ourselves and encourage other people to start thinking about how to improve each of our own circumstances and quality of life while still engaging with these systems and navigating mental health care.
That was a pretty long detour.
Yeah, sorry. Also, just kind of briefly along this feedback topic, I think that there has also been some skepticism expressed around the level of transparency that we're offering, or that we have offered over the last year, in terms of really over-focusing on the successes and not sharing the difficulties, or, glossing over or framing it in a way that makes it seem like a success story. But we've shared a lot of difficult experiences throughout this journey as well. And that's been a really important thing to us to communicate too.
Well, first of all, I think your experience of the illness is well documented in the previous,
Right.
5 years or whatever. And then throughout this project, what has been documented is obviously the improvements, but also kind of the like struggles with all of it, really, like, and in particular, like with withdrawal. There's kind of countless examples of that.
So I really am sharing the full breadth of the experience. I'm really not trying to hide anything or over highlight the success.
Yeah, I think maybe what people might be feeling is that you are manic or psychotic behind the scenes. And I can just vouch for the fact that that's not happening. I mean, whatever that means in terms of you taking my word for it. I mean, you should be able to take her word for it. But
stop gaslighting me. I'm okay.
And maybe, you've had lots of conversations about medication and like, okay, because I think there's this idea that it's episodic. So you aren't experiencing symptoms right now, but you will in the future. And then what? Again, kind of reiterating that first, that hasn't been your experience. Like, it's been a case where like you had breakthrough symptoms quite regularly, even when you were on medication. But also, if you were experiencing symptoms in the future,
I'm super open to using medication
well, but I also think that's something that would be honest with.
Absolutely share that. If I started to experience symptoms of my illness again, I do feel that that's really important to share in the context of this journey. And I promise I will do that. If we're still doing YouTube, I don't know, maybe it'll happen when I'm like 80 and we're no longer doing YouTube. I don't know. Anyway, but that kind of also brings us around to like, there's been a lot of people accusing us of deleting comments that are critical, and just want to also clarify that we do not do that. We don't delete comments. The only comments I've ever hidden from the channel have been when they've been hateful comments directed to guests that we've had on the channel, just for the sake of protecting them, because I don't think that's fair to subject them to hate. But if it's at me or Rob, we leave them. So let it be known, we do not delete comments.
I think YouTube does sometimes moderate comments. Like if there's links in the comments, then it doesn't seem
It
to
hides
like,
them,
yeah, it hides those.
So
But
if you want to spew hate, don't add a link. I'm just kidding. Cut that.
I wonder though if it does like moderate, like if people are swearing or whatever, that kind of thing. I don't know.
I don't know. It's not us, okay? I'm not trying to hide anything. So where are we going from here? So we've almost been at this for a year now, and it's felt very successful, but I think that there are still a lot of questions and from myself too, in terms of, well, what does this look like long term? You know, do you continue to do strict medical keto for the rest of your life, or are there other options? And so I think this is kind of cool because we can just kind of use you as the guinea pig before I do anything or make any adjustments. But, you know, like you've been experimenting with carb intake for exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of figuring that out with him before I implement it, because it does seem a little bit higher stakes for me in terms of not being psychotic. But also, you know, I think that maybe you had in mind adjusting your diet a little bit to be more in line with paleo, or testing out things like intermittent fasting. I guess getting more into figuring out what is the sustainability element of this, and also digging deeper into how to make this more accessible. And so one thing that I'm really excited about is I'm going to be very shortly starting a course provided by Dr. Georgia Eid that goes into detail about how to implement metabolic therapies in clinical practice. I'm a YouTuber, but I'm also a social worker, so I snuck in there as a clinician. But I'm really excited to be able to bring the knowledge that I gain in that course into our YouTube content too, and hopefully that will also help in figuring out how to make this more of an accessible intervention for anyone. And maybe that's something important to address too, in terms of accessibility and how many people have felt that how I've gone about this feels inaccessible to a lot of people. And agree, I've had a tremendous amount of privilege, and maybe it's worth talking about what this looks like if you don't have the supports that I had in place. It was super helpful having Rob go through this with me as a support person to navigate it with. But I understand that there's a lot of people who don't have that kind of support person in their day-to-day life that can do that.
Do you think you could have done it without support?
I think that's a difficult thing, because I think that I was at a place in my life where I was much more readily able to engage in it because of support that I had in the, like, I don't know how long we've been together, 5 years before that, that got me to a space where I was really stable and able to commit to this. But pre that, when I was really struggling, I don't know, I think it would have been a lot more difficult. And so it's worth figuring out how to create that level of support for others. And so that is one thing we were trying to do. We created an online peer support community for people to come together who are interested in using keto and metabolic therapies to treat and manage their mental illness. And the hope is that that can provide some of that social support that does feel really important when making a really big change like this. We've made a video about how much we spend eating keto, which you can check out, but I understand that even that does feel out of reach for a lot of people. And so, yeah, we are going to focus more on, okay, how do you do this on any type of budget, specifically really tight budgets? And it was also really, really, really helpful to have Nicole Laurent, my keto coach, guiding us through this and helping troubleshoot the many different issues that we ran into and figuring out, how to tailor it to my needs, our needs. But again, understand that that's not totally accessible either, but there is a ton of information out there. And a specifically really good resource is Metabolic Mind's YouTube channel. Also, their website has links to a bunch of different resources and an overview of all the studies being done, and that you can maybe take to your clinician to help them learn more too. And definitely check that out. Sorry, that was a bit meandering, but we did want to provide an update, and also, I guess, maybe have like a real conversation about what's going on to hopefully help communicate that we are trying to be as transparent about this as possible. And thank you very much. If you've been following along on this journey over the last year, it's been a wild ride. I'm grateful for everyone watching.
It's been so incredible to hear from people who started keto while we were doing this project, and to hear how it's impacting their lives and the difference that it's making, and knowing that, okay, like it's not just you, like other people are benefiting from this as well. And I hope us putting out content like this helps even more people. Maybe not like this, but like the other videos.
Yeah, this one has not been helpful.
This one probably isn't as helpful as other ones.
I hope too that it can be understood that we're really coming at sharing all of this from a perspective of wanting to empower people and help people figure out how to make choices around their own care and their own mental health and wellness that improve each person's own quality of life. And that is really where we're coming from in terms of this is why I tried this and why we decided to share it, really coming from a place of wanting to improve my experience of life and other people who are watching their own experience of life as well. Okay. Well, thank you for watching. Wishing you and your loved ones good health, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye. It's your channel.
It's my channel. Lauren Kennedy West is the name of the channel. Not Rob.
It feels a little difficult to understand how people are going to find this mess of a conversation helpful. But, hopefully there's something of value, or that you took away something from this. That's her send-off.
I don't know, whatever.
She wanted me to do this closing part of the video. That's what I came up with. There's no way you're cutting that in.